Assigned living quarters in Vulpine society, now every Fox-Vixen hungers for a date solo. The misunderstood honor. The evening mist clung to the forest path as Caden Reeves adjusted the pack on his shoulders, following the Fox-Folk guide through towering silverwood trees. Somewhere ahead lay Silver Paw Vale, the isolated enclave renowned for its lunar orchids, the rare flowers that bloomed only under moonlight and held properties he'd spent years hoping to study. "Moonstone Residence is prepared for you, honored guest," the guide said, his russet tail swishing with what Caden interpreted as simple courtesy. Caden nodded his thanks, too travel-weary to question the reverent tone. The enclave emerged from the forest like a dream, curved dwellings built into living trees, paper lanterns casting warm glows across cobblestone paths, and foxfolk of various colorations moving with fluid grace through the evening activities. Elder Fenora, a silver-furred matriarch with knowing amber eyes, greeted him at the Vale's heart. "Welcome, Caden Reeves. Your arrival brings joy to our community. The Moonstone Residence has awaited its next occupant for 3 seasons." "I'm grateful for your hospitality," Caden replied, bowing as he'd been taught in his cultural preparation studies. The elder's whiskers twitched with what might have been amusement. "The residence stands alone near the eastern gardens, private, serene, befitting one who seeks completion." Caden assumed she meant completion of his research. He was led to a beautiful circular dwelling with walls of polished white stone that seemed to glow softly in the moonlight. Inside he found luxurious furnishings, a sleeping platform covered in silk cushions, and windows that opened to a view of luminescent orchids swaying in the night breeze. What Caden didn't know was that in Silver Paw Vale, living quarters spoke a language he had yet to learn.
3 invitations under starlight. Caden woke to soft knocking and found a cream-furred vixen at his door, her emerald eyes gentle and observant. She wore robes marked with healing symbols and carried a basket of morning herbs. "Forgive the early intrusion. I am Talise Emberpaw, a Vale's healer. I brought chamomile and silverleaf tea to help you adjust to our altitude." Her voice was soft, almost musical. "That's very thoughtful," Caden said, accepting the basket. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he noticed how she lingered just a moment before stepping back. "If you find yourself free this evening, my garden holds many medicinal plants you might find fascinating. For your research." She smiled, a delicate hope in her expression, before departing. An hour later, Lysara Nightwhisper arrived, her charcoal fur sleek and her violet eyes sharp with intelligence. "I am told you study rare flora. Our archives contain botanical records spanning 8 centuries, illustrations, cultivation techniques, even poetry about the lunar orchids. Would you honor me with your company this afternoon? I could use a scholar's perspective." Caden's heart lifted at the prospect. "I'd be delighted." Lysara's tail curved with satisfaction. "Excellent. I shall prepare tea and ensure we have privacy for deep discussion." By midday, Ravenna Silkbrush appeared, practically bouncing with energy, her golden red coat adorned with festival ribbons. "Caden Reeves, the Spring Moon Festival is in 3 days, and you simply must experience our traditions. Join me this evening at the pavilion. I need someone with fresh eyes to judge the lantern arrangements. Please say yes." Her enthusiasm was infectious. How could I refuse? "Wonderful." She clasped his hands briefly, her warmth lingering. "Sunset at the pavilion. Don't be late." As evening approached, Caden found himself torn between 3 invitations, all scheduled for the same night. In his culture, this would be an awkward social collision, but perhaps he'd misunderstood the timing. He decided to visit Lysara first. The archives were magnificent, scroll-lined walls reaching toward vaulted ceilings, the scent of aged parchment and ink filling the air. Lysara moved through the space with reverent familiarity, pulling texts and laying them before him. "This manuscript details lunar orchid germination during eclipse cycles," she explained, leaning close as they examined intricate illustrations. Her shoulder pressed against his, and he felt the warmth of her presence. The ancient botanists believed the flowers responded to emotional resonance, not just moonlight. "Emotional resonance?" Caden asked, genuinely intrigued. "They bloom brightest near bonded pairs," said Lysara softly, her gaze meeting his with unexpected intensity. "Near those who found their completion." The moments stretched between them, charged with meaning Caden couldn't quite grasp. Before he could respond, Lysara pulled back slightly, her professional demeanor returning. "But I mustn't monopolize your evening. I believe Ravenna is expecting you." Confused by her knowing tone, Caden hurried to the pavilion, where Ravenna immediately pulled him into a whirlwind of activity, testing lantern placements, sampling festival foods, and teaching him a traditional dance that left them both laughing and breathless. "You're a natural," Ravenna exclaimed, her hand still in his as the music faded. "Will you be my partner for the festival dance?" "I'd be honored," I replied, noticing how her eyes sparkled with something beyond mere friendship. Finally, he made his way to Talisa's moonlit garden, apologizing for his lateness. She simply smiled, leading him along paths lined with luminescent flowers that released sweet fragrances as they passed. "Each plant here has a purpose," Talise explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "This one mends broken bones, that one soothes troubled minds, and these," she stopped before a cluster of silver blossoms, "these heal wounded hearts." "Do hearts wound like bones?" Caden asked, drawn into the intimacy of the moment. "More deeply," Talise replied, turning to face him, "and take longer to mend. Sometimes they need—" She hesitated, her courage wavering. "Someone patient enough to tend them." In the moonlight, Caden saw vulnerability in her expression, a loneliness that mirrored his own years of solitary research, moving from place to place with no roots, no home. He reached out instinctively, taking her hand. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said simply. Talisa's fingers intertwined with his, and for the first time since arriving, Caden wondered if his assignment to the Moonstone residence had been a mistake at all, or perhaps the most fortunate accident of his life. The Dance of Hidden Hearts. The Spring Moon Festival transformed Silver Paw Vale into a wonderland of light and music. Lanterns floated on magical currents above the central plaza, casting rainbow reflections across the assembled foxfolk. Caden wore ceremonial robes that Ravenna had insisted he borrow, deep blue silk embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. "You look like you belong here," Ravenna whispered as she appeared at his side, stunning in golden festival attire that complemented her fur. She took his arm naturally, guiding him through the celebrations. They sampled honey wines and spiced pastries, watched acrobatic performances, and laughed at traditional comedy skits that Ravenna translated with animated gestures. But when the ceremonial dance began, a slow, intimate waltz under the twin moons, something shifted. Ravenna led him through the steps with practiced grace, but Caden found his eyes searching the crowd. Lysara danced nearby with an elder scholar, her movements elegant but her attention drifting toward him. And there, at the garden's edge, stood Talise, watching with an expression that made his chest tighten. "You feel it, don't you?" Ravenna said softly, following his gaze. "The pull toward her." Caden started to deny it, but Ravenna squeezed his hand gently. "Don't. I've seen how you look at Talise, and how she looks at you, like you're seeing each other's spirits, not just faces." "I never meant to win 3 hearts?" Ravenna's smile was bittersweet. "The Moonstone residents declared you available, Caden. We each hoped. But true connection cannot be forced, only recognized." The dance ended, and Ravenna kissed his cheek softly. "Go to her. Some dances are meant for 2 specific souls." Caden made his way through the crowd, finding Talise still standing at the garden's threshold. She turned as he approached, surprise and hope warring in her expression. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. Without music, without audience, they began to move together in the quiet space between festival and garden. Talise fit against him perfectly, her head resting just below his chin, her presence filling spaces inside him he hadn't known were empty. "I need to tell you something," Talise whispered. "The Moonstone residence, it's not just guest quarters. In our tradition, it means you're seeking a life mate. When you accepted it, the entire Vale assumed you came here looking for love." Cadence stopped moving, pulling back to see her face. "I had no idea. I thought it was just where they put visiting researchers." "I know," Talise said, her voice catching. "At first, we all thought you were simply following custom, but then I spent time with you, and I realized you didn't know. You were just yourself, genuine, kind, curious about everything I showed you, not because tradition demanded it, but because you actually cared." "I did care," Cadence said, his hands moving to cup her face gently. "I do care. Talise, I've spent my whole adult life moving from place to place, studying beautiful things, but never staying long enough to plant roots. But here, with you—" "You're leaving when your research ends," Talise interrupted, a tear tracing down her fur. "In 3 weeks, you'll return to your world, and this will just be a beautiful memory." "What if I didn't leave?" The words surprised Caden as he spoke them, but they felt true, truer than any hypothesis he'd ever tested. "What if I stayed?" Talise's breath caught. "You can't mean that. You'd give up everything you know for you. For a chance at something I never thought I'd find. Talise, I've been lonely my entire life, surrounded by people, but never truly seen. But you see me, not a research grant or a visiting scholar or a cultural curiosity, just me." The space between them dissolved. Talise rose on her toes as Caden leaned down, and their lips met in a kiss that tasted of moonflower honey and promises. Her arms wrapped around his neck, his hands spread across her back, pulling her closer, as if they could merge 2 different worlds through sheer wanting. When they finally parted, both breathless, Elder Fenora stood at the garden entrance, her ancient eyes twinkling. "The Moonstone residence chooses well," she said simply, before disappearing back into the festival lights.
When tradition meets true choice. The days following the festival passed in a blur of stolen moments and deepening connection. Caden continued his orchid research, but now Talise worked beside him, their hands brushing as they cataloged specimens, their conversations flowing from botanical properties to childhood memories to dreams they'd never voiced aloud. Lysara visited the Moonstone residence one morning, carrying a leather-bound journal. Her violet eyes held wisdom beyond her years as she set it on Caden's table. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said quietly. "She was human, a traveler who fell in love with a foxfolk scholar and chose to stay. I thought you might find her writings illuminating." Caden opened the journal, seeing sketches of the Vale from decades past, entries about navigating 2 cultures, and love letters that made his heart ache with their tenderness. "Thank you, Lysara. This means—" "I know what it means," she interrupted gently. "I also know that Talise is fortunate. Treat her heart with the reverence you'd give your rarest orchid." She paused at the door. "And Caden, welcome to our family." That afternoon, Ravenna appeared with a woven bracelet in traditional mating colors, cream and green intertwined, representing Talise's healing spirit and Caden's growth-bringing presence. "I made this for whoever you chose," Ravenna said, her usual exuberance tempered with genuine affection. "Well, for whoever your heart chose, since hearts rarely listen to logic." She tied it around his wrist with practiced fingers. "At the choosing ceremony, you'll exchange these. I wanted yours to be special." "Ravenna, I never wanted to hurt." "You didn't," she assured her, her golden eyes bright. "You gave me something precious. You reminded me that connection should feel effortless, not forced. Somewhere in this vast world is someone who look at me the way you look at Talise, and I'll recognize it because I've seen the real thing. But not everyone celebrated the budding union. That evening, as Caden walked to Talise's garden, he was intercepted by Vorin Sharpclaw, a foxfolk warrior whose copper fur bristled with hostility. "You think you can simply claim our healer, take one of our finest, and bind her to a human who'll age and die while she's still young? You're selfish, outsider." Caden's throat tightened. He'd never considered the lifespan difference. Foxfolk live nearly twice as long as humans. Would loving him condemn Talise to decades of widowhood? He found her in the garden, and the joy in her expression when she saw him made his next words feel like poison. "Talise, we need to talk about something I should have thought of sooner." He took her hands, memorizing their warmth. "Your lifespan. I'll grow gray while you're still vital and strong. I'll die while you have half a life yet to live. How can I ask you to accept that pain?" Talise's eyes filled with tears, but her grip on his hands tightened. "Do you know why I became a healer, Caden? Because I watched my parents share 40 beautiful years before my father passed. My mother, a Fox-Vixen, loved a human traveler who stayed. When he died, I saw her grieve, but I also heard what she told me. She pulled him to sit beside her on a stone bench beneath the silver willows, their branches swaying in the evening breeze. She said that 40 years of true love was worth more than 200 years of comfortable companionship, that she'd rather burn bright for decades with someone who set her soul on fire than simmer endlessly with someone who merely warmed the edges. Talise's voice broke. She told me that when I found that kind of love, I should grab it with both hands and never let go, regardless of how long the dance lasted. Caden felt tears on his own cheeks. "I'll grow gray and slow while you're still beautiful and strong. Then I'll tend your graying hair and support your slowing steps and count myself blessed for every single moment." Talise cupped his face, her thumbs brushing away his tears. "Caden, I've healed hundreds of bodies in my years, but you're the first person who's ever healed my loneliness. Don't ask me to give that up because of fear." "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Terrified I'm not enough, that I'm being selfish, that I'll fail you." "Then be terrified with me," Talise whispered, "because I'm scared too. Scared you'll wake up one day and miss your old life. Scared I won't be enough to make staying worthwhile. Scared of losing you to age or accident or any of the 1,000 ways we lose the ones we love. But Caden, I'd rather live scared beside you than safe and alone." Under the silver willows, with fireflies beginning their nightly dance and the scent of moonflowers heavy in the air, Caden pulled Talise close and kissed her with all the certainty he'd been missing. Her response was equally fierce, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed against him as if she could permanently erase the distance between their worlds. When they finally parted, both breathless, Talise rested her forehead against him. "Stay," she whispered, "not as a guest, not as a researcher. Stay as mine, and let me be yours." "Yes," Caden breathed. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you." Above them, Elder Fenora watched from her dwelling's window, her old heart glad. The Moonstone residence had called to another wandering soul, and once again it had found its answer. But somewhere in the shadows, Vorin Sharpclaw clenched his fists, unable to understand how anyone could celebrate a union doomed by mortality's inequality.
A new home, a chosen heart. The choosing ceremony took place under the full twin moons. The entire vale gathered in the sacred grove, where ancient silver woods formed a natural cathedral.
Caden wore traditional Fox folk ceremonial robes, cream silk embroidered with healing symbols that Talise had stitched herself during long evenings, each thread a meditation on their future. Talise emerged from the elder's dwelling in robes of green and silver, her cream fur brushed to luminous perfection, moonflowers woven into a crown that seemed to glow with its own light. When her eyes found Caden's across the assembled crowd, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Elder Fenora raised her staff, and silence fell. We gather to witness a truth as old as time, that love recognizes no borders, respects no boundaries, and blooms wherever two souls choose to nurture it. Caden Reeves came to us as a seeker of flowers. He leaves as family, bound by choice rather than chance. Caden and Talise approached the center, where two silver willows had grown together, their branches intertwined so completely it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. "Speak your truth," Elder Fenora instructed Caden. He took Talise's hands, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I came here looking for rare beauty and found something infinitely more precious, a home not in a place but in a person. Talise, you've taught me that roots aren't about where you're planted, but who you're planted beside. I choose you, today and all my days." He tied Ravenna's woven bracelet around Talise's wrist, the cream and green threads catching moonlight. Talise's voice trembled with emotion as she spoke. "I've spent my life healing others, but never believed anyone could heal me. Caden, you've shown me that wholeness isn't about being complete alone. It's about finding someone whose broken edges fit perfectly with yours. I choose you, for however long the universe grants us." She tied a matching bracelet around his wrist, one she'd woven herself, with strands of her own fur intertwined with fibers from his first orchid harvest, a literal blending of their worlds. Elder Fenora brought forth a silver cup filled with moonflower wine. "Drink together and let your paths become one." They sipped from opposite sides, their eyes locked, and when they lowered the cup, the entire vale erupted in celebration. Foxfolk ululated in traditional joy songs, lanterns burst into colorful flames above them, and musicians struck up a dance that would last until dawn. But before joining the festivities, Vorin Sharpclaw stepped forward. The crowd hushed, sensing potential conflict. "I challenged your right to be here," Vorin said, his copper fur still bristling, but his eyes holding grudging respect. "I called you selfish, but watching you these past weeks, seeing you learn our language, adopt our customs, genuinely care for our community, I was wrong. You're not taking Talise from us, you're joining us." He extended his hand, human style. "Welcome, brother." Caden clasped his hand, feeling the strength in the warrior's grip and the sincerity in his words. "Thank you." The celebration that followed was everything Caden never knew he needed. He danced with Talise until his legs ached, laughed with Lasara and Ravenna over shared memories, and listened to elders tell stories of other cross-cultural unions that had enriched the Vale over centuries. Near dawn, Caden and Talise finally escaped to the Moonstone residence, now truly theirs, no longer a symbol of seeking, but of finding. Inside, surrounded by both their belongings now mingled together, Talise turned to him with eyes full of wonder and desire. "I used to think this dwelling was for people searching," she whispered, her hands sliding up his chest to rest over his heart. "But it's really for people who found what they didn't know they were looking for." Caden pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted of moonflower wine and promises kept. They moved together toward the sleeping platform, no longer two separate beings, but partners beginning their shared journey. As he laid her down among the silk cushions, the moonlight streaming through windows illuminated them both, human and foxfolk, different yet perfectly matched. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, discovery and recognition intertwined. Caden learned the sensitive places behind her ears that made her gasp, the way she arched into his touch when he traced patterns down her spine. Talise showed him how foxfolk expressed devotion through gentle nips and longer caresses, her tail wrapping around his leg as if to anchor them together. Afterward, they lay entwined, watching the twin moons set through the western window. "No regrets?" Talise asked softly, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Only that I didn't find you sooner, though maybe we both needed our separate journeys to appreciate where we've arrived." In the months that followed, Caden integrated his botanical research with Talise's healing practice, discovering that lunar orchids responded not just to moonlight, but to the presence of genuine emotional bonds, just as the ancient texts had suggested. Their combined work produced breakthroughs that benefited the entire Vale. He taught classes in human botany while learning foxfolk healing arts. Talise traveled with him to human cities occasionally, bridging their two cultures with grace. And every night they returned to the Moonstone residence, no longer a symbol of seeking, but a sanctuary they'd built together. 5 years later, when Caden's first gray hairs appeared, Talise kissed each one and called them marks of wisdom earned. And when younger foxfolk asked if they regretted choosing a partner whose time with her would be shorter, she simply smiled and said, "I'd rather have 50 years of extraordinary love than 200 years of ordinary existence. Every moment with Caden is a gift I unwrap daily." And Caden, holding her close as they watched another moonrise over their garden, knew he'd made the only choice his heart could have made: to stay, to love, and to build a life where belonging wasn't about species or tradition, but about two souls who recognized each other and refused to let go.